At what point does dominance stop looking like engineering and start raising questions? All right, let's talk about something important. When new regulations come into Formula One, there is an expectation that factory teams should be ahead. They design the full package. They understand the integration better. So yes, they should have an advantage. But not like this. Not more than half a second. Not cars disappearing into the distance. And definitely not customer teams running the same power unit getting lapped. G'day Koala crew, and welcome to another non-race episode of the Formula Files, where we discuss inconvenient observations that they would rather we pretended not to notice. Formula One has always been about engineering innovation. Take the Ferrari stallions. They didn't just turn up and magically dominate, they innovated within the rules. They ran a smaller turbo, giving them better response off the line and improved energy recovery. They introduced clever aero details like that little flap near the exhaust and refined airflow with those windscreen wing elements. All small ideas that added up to real performance. And here's the key part. Their customer team? Haas. And what are we seeing there? Is exactly what you'd expect. A young driver like Ollie Bear, learning, improving, occasionally impressive, but not suddenly beating Charles or Lewis. That's normal. That's expected. That's the correct gap between factory team and customer team when the customer team is a junior or feeder team. But here's the thing. When the customer teams have the stronger drivers, the works team doesn't just casually lap them for fun. The works team doesn't magically run flawless, bulletproof performance, while their customers are out there collecting DNS records like trading cards. And the less impressive junior driver in the works car, they don't suddenly start out qualifying proven top-tier drivers by half a second a lap in cars supposedly running the same power unit. That's not normal. That's not just working harder. That's something else entirely. Because it takes a special kind of optimism to look at that and go, yep, all checks out. And it takes a truly heroic level of arrogance to assume long-term fans are buying the whole history boy is just exceptional storyline when his junior record was so underwhelming it didn't even justify an F1 seat, let alone half a second domination straight out of the box. Because this is where things stop making sense. You've got a junior driver with a less than stellar performance in feeder series and a senior driver who's always been solid, but not exceptional. And suddenly, they're untouchable. Meanwhile, the Papayas, double DNS with supplier-linked issues. The Willis cars, lapped even with Carlos Hare, who, let's be honest, is a far better all-round racer than George, was lapped even while finishing in the points. And Oscar, and yes, even Lando, both significantly better than Kimi. No matter how hard the sheet media are desperately trying to convince us otherwise, being out-qualified by more than half a second even with flawless laps, while Kimi's own quali laps were liberally spiced with non-pole-worthy lockups. Well, that doesn't look like driver brilliance or natural development or marginal engineering gains. No, it looks like a massive imbalance. That creates a perception problem, and in Formula One, perception matters. Because F1 fans don't just watch results, they interpret them. Last time the Arrows dominated like this, they had Lewis, legend, a proven champion. He had charisma and purpose, a narrative people believed because they really wanted to believe, so fans accepted it. But this time, now, you've got George, consistent but never dominant, Kimi, talented but not generational, and we're being asked to believe this is the same kind of greatness? It's a harder sell, because when people think of real driver brilliance, they think of Max. A real racer who can extract more from a car than it should reasonably give. That's what greatness looks like. But Kimi? He looks like Toto's attempt to recreate a teenage Max and failing. Because Kimi is not Max great, and never will be. Because this isn't that. And no amount of records, youngest ever stats, or laughable history boy headlines changes what people are seeing. Factory domination, customers struggling, reliability gaps. This doesn't look right. So let's speak plainly. If this were genuine engineering excellence, we'd be admiring it. If we were truly witnessing driver brilliance, we wouldn't need stupid headlines. But we're not. We're questioning it. And that's the difference. Because Formula One has always rewarded teams who push the boundaries, but not teams who appear to move the goalposts. And fans notice the difference. All right, let's just pause for a second. Because this part isn't even satire anymore. This is a message. To the Arrows. What you're doing right now, it's not subtle, it's not clever, and it's definitely not helping your brand. Because the idea that this level of dominance is just great engineering, driver brilliance, hard work over the off-season, yeah, we're not buying it. Fans aren't stupid. We've watched this sport for years. We know what close competition looks like, genuine driver dominance looks like, and what a car advantage looks like. And this isn't marginal gains. This is a massive, visible, uncomfortable gap between the factory team and supposedly the exact same machinery being supplied to customer teams. Let's talk about the papayas, because this is where it gets really awkward. The papayas, double DNS, multiple issues, from systems supplied by you. Now, outside of something like the 2005 Koala tire controversy, that kind of thing is almost unheard of. And the last time a driver had back-to-back DNS like Oscar? Bruce McLaren in 1969. Not exactly the kind of record you want your Arrow power unit associated with. And here's the problem. That doesn't make McLando look bad. That reflects on you, because you are the supplier. This performance gap equals a perception problem. Let's break it down simply. Last year, the papaya car was fast. The works car was just as fast. The difference? Drivers. At least one of the papaya drivers was exceptional, the other was good and had a whole team dedicated to helping him win. Your drivers? Solid, good. But not the great that they would need to be to make the current narrative believable. This year, factory team untouchable, customer team struggling, reliability inconsistent. That's not a driver story anymore, that's a supply story. And trying to push the idea that it's the papaya car, it's the papaya drivers, while your own factory team is half a second faster, significantly more reliable, well, it doesn't convince anyone. It just raises more questions. Because let's be honest, we're supposed to believe that Kimi, who had a very average F2 campaign, and George, who has always been good but not dominant, have suddenly become untouchable generational talents overnight? No, that's not how this works. This backfires hard. Because what fans are seeing isn't, wow, what an incredible team. They're seeing, why is that car so much better? Why aren't the customer teams getting the same performance? Why are failures happening there, but not here? And that leads to one word, doubt. And doubt erodes trust and damages brands. We've already seen what happens when things feel manipulated. Look at what happened to Lando. Even with a championship, or maybe because of it. The perception stuck. The credibility took a hit. The brand suffered. Lando's gone from McLando Golden Boy to borderline brand kryptonite. Because here's the thing, fans aren't stupid. They saw the narrative. They understood the narrative. And then they collectively went, yeah, nah, we're not buying that, mate. And it wasn't just that they didn't believe it, they felt like it was being force-fed. And nothing annoys motorsport fans more than being told what they're supposed to think. So instead of boosting Lando, it's actually done the opposite. His reputation's taken a hit. And unfortunately for McLando, he didn't fall alone. Because when the face of your team looks a bit manufactured, the whole operation starts to feel the same way. Bit harsh? Maybe. Bit true? Also maybe. Lucky they still have Oscar to bring them credibility. At least for now. And Arrows, you're heading the same way. Because no amount of history boy, youngest ever, record breaker changes the underlying issue. If the foundation feels off, the records don't inspire, they irritate. And yes, the fans, they are irritated. You don't need insider access, just scroll social media for 5 minutes. Pattern recognition kicks in pretty quickly. Angry fans, switching off, calling it another scripted season. Last year, people weren't tuning in to see if Lando would win. They were watching for 2 things. 1, whether McLando would actually be fair like they claimed and Oscar would win. They weren't, so he didn't. Or 2, whether Max could pull off the greatest comeback in F1 history. Neither happened. Instead, we got the slow march back to the predetermined British champion and a whole lot of fans quietly checked out. This year, there was hope. Even if it was just Arrows versus their customer teams, at least it might be close. But then, off-season sandbagging, sudden dominance, and a gap so big it raises more eyebrows than excitement. And just like that, a huge chunk of the fan base went, nope, not doing this again. Because people don't want to sit through another Arrow dominance era just to satisfy the vanity project of a team principal or the quarterly expectations of shareholders. The ones still watching? They're hanging on for one thing. The moment the FIA steps in and levels the playing field. But here's the problem. By the time that happens, if it happens, It's already too late. Too late to save the season. Too late to save the narrative. And possibly, too late to save the reputation of the Arrows and their drivers. Because watching other teams catch up when they're only equal again, that's not exciting. That's just a slow, predictable crawl toward yet another Arrow driver wins predetermined championship. And that's not sport, that's scheduling. What it does create is blame. Right now, fans are pointing fingers at Audi for ruining F1 with these awful Franken cars. But if this level of Arrow dominance, paired with increasingly cringe headlines, keeps going, that spotlight shifts to the Arrows. And yes, it already is. Franken cars plus suspicious dominance does not an exciting season make. So here it is, from real race fans. If you wanted to prove your engineering excellence, build respect, and strengthen your brand, then this was not the way to do it. Because right now, it doesn't look like dominance. It looks like imbalance. And that doesn't make people admire you. It irritates them, makes them switch off. And if fans start switching off, it won't matter how fast your car is. Winning will only make it worse. That's just something to think about. So, Koala crew, do you think that this season is starting to look as scripted as the last? And are you losing interest faster than the F1 car's battery drain down the straights? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel. And if you want to help keep the Koala commentary coming, then join or buy me a coffee. Link below. Battery level 30% and falling. Same as my interest in F1 with these new regs.